Good morning. Well, I can't wait to read this book again. Today, June 14th, 2026. Alright, let me see. I just read the page. She announced her mother's death. Yeah, it was quite shocking. On page 121. If you ask me today what really happened to my mother, I could not tell you exactly. Only what everyone told me. And that would not be the truth, only gossip. I knew this though. What my mother did was a big disgrace. That's why they said she died, to bury her scandal. That's why no one would ever talk about her to my father. That's why they sent me away, so I would not remind him of her. And yet, many times they gossiped about her. They all did. Old aunt, new aunt, uncle, and their friends, over tea, during meals, after the noontime nap. For many years, my mother was the source of funny and bad stories, terrible secrets and romantic tales. It was like digging up her grave, then pushing her down farther, always throwing more dirt on top. Can you imagine how a little girl would feel hearing this about her own mother? That's really crazy to think about. I heard what they said. I felt so bad to hear them, and yet I could not stop myself from listening. I wanted to know how it could be that my mother left me, never telling me why. So that's how my mother became a riddle, each piece of gossip making another question in my head. If she was dead, why did they hold no funeral? If she was alive, why didn't she come back to get me? If she ran away, where did she go? Sometimes I would try to put together all the pieces of gossip I heard. I would try to make one whole story, but then each part would contradict the next until no part made sense. So then I looked at what I knew about my mother, both good things and bad. I tried to think of all the reasons why her life went one way or the other, and this is what I think happened. How my mother came to be the second wife to my father, and later, why she left. My mother was not like the Chinese girls Americans always imagine, the kind who walk around with tiny bound feet, choosing their words as delicately as they choose their steps. My mother was a modern girl. Many girls in Shanghai were. They were not peasants, nothing of the kind. When my mother was 8 years old, her feet was already unbound, and some people say that's why she ran wild. She had been born into a wealthy, educated family in Shanghai, the only child of a Ningbo father and a Suzhou mother. Suzhou is that city of ladies with beautiful soft voices. Even the Shanghainese would tell you a Suzhou accent is the best. And Ningbo people are such good business people, they continue to argue even after they have already made a bargain. So you see, my mother was born with a double character already fighting inside of her. I think my mother must have been a classic beauty, the kind other girls would read about in a story and cry over, wishing they were reading about themselves. My mother once read me a story like that, about a beautiful but lonely girl. One day, she looked in a pond and thought she had finally found a friend, someone who did not envy her. She did not know that the shimmering face smiling back at her was her own reflection. At the end of the story, my mother exclaimed, "Nonsense! What girl would not know her own self looking back at her?" In any case, my mother did not look in a pond. She looked in a mirror. Every night she did this. So, if I'm honest, I would have to say my mother was proud of her looks, maybe even vain, just a little. Of course, she had reason to be proud. Her skin was the color of white jade, or maybe it was the color of a summer peach, or maybe I am only remembering my mother as another classical tale. All those phrases about ladies with voices as pretty sounding as lutes, skin as white as jade, their gracefulness flowing like calm rivers. Why did stories always describe women that way, making us believe we had to be that way too? Maybe my mother was not pretty at all, and I only want to believe that she was. But then I think, Why else did my father marry her? He was an important man. He could have had all kinds of wives, which he did. Back then, there was no other reason to marry a second, third, or fourth wife except to use a woman's prettiness to add to a man's prestige. So I think my mother must have been pretty. It is not just classical story. It is not just bad classical stories that make me think this way. There was a reason why she had to be. She was also smart and clever, quick thinking too. I have already mentioned that she was educated. She went to a missionary school in Shanghai, the first Chinese school girls could go to. That's because her father, my Gong, was very educated himself, a scholar official, like a bureau chief in charge of reforms for foreign affairs, something important like that. In any case, many of the officials at that time were sending their daughters off to get an education. That was the modern thought. Educate sons, educate daughters a little to prove you were not too feudal thinking. But Gong did not want to send her to France or England or America, the way some families did just to prove how rich they were. All those girls came home with short hair and dogs' faces from playing tennis outside in the sun. Why should he educate a daughter only to turn her into a girl he did not like? So, in 1897, when the missionary school first opened in Shanghai, Gong sent my mother there. I heard my mother even learned English at that school, although I never heard her say any English words except biscuit. New aunt, who went to the same missionary school, said my mother was not a good student, not very good at all. Maybe that's why I was the same way. She said my mother had a fighting temper. Maybe that's why I was the same way. She was naughty. Maybe that's why I was the same way. New aunt said that once, during prayers at that school, an old nun let out a loud fart by accident, of course, and my mother burst out laughing and said, "God heard that." I don't know why the nuns liked her so much. New aunt said to me, they told her, "We are praying hard for you, little one. If you become a Christian, you can go to heaven when you die." And your mother, so willful, she said, "When I die, I don't want to live in a heavenly foreign concession." Do you know what those nuns did? Laughed, only that. New aunt was so jealous. She used to say, "I was never bad like your mother, so why didn't the nuns pray hard for me?" Old aunt, on the other hand, did not go to that school, no school whatsoever. She was raised in a feudal family, the traditional way. The girl's eyes should never be used for reading, only for sewing. The girl's ears should never be used for listening to ideas, only to orders. The girl's lips should be small, rarely used, except to express appreciation or ask for approval. Of course, all this feudal thinking only made old aunt more opinionated on all kinds of matters. Her education was the cause. Old aunt would always say, they put Western thoughts into a Chinese mind, causing everything to ferment. It is the same way eating foreign food, upset stomach, upset mind. The foreign teachers want to overturn all order in the world. Confucius is bad, Jesus is good. Girls can be teachers. Girls do not have to marry. For what purpose do they teach this? Upside down thinking. That's what got her into trouble. And then old aunt would warn me, Wei, do not follow your teachers too closely. Look what happened to your mother. If you were to ask me, what happened to my mother was not a bad education but bad fate. Her education would only made her unhappy thinking about it, that no matter how much she changed her life, she could not change the world that surrounded her. Uncle used to say that none of this would have happened if my mother had not been the only child. All the will and stubbornness that should have been given to a boy went into her. Worse, her parents let her stay at home and grow stronger and stronger. They were thinking they could wait and pick a husband for their only daughter when she was maybe 22. Before that could happen, the revolutionaries came and threw the Manchus out. That was in 1911, when my mother was just 21 years old. No more Qing dynasty, no more scholar official job for Gong. A servant told Gong this bad news while he was eating his noontime meal. He was chewing a piece of steamed tendon. Suddenly Gong yelled like a wild animal, then bit his tongue right in half. Or perhaps he bit his tongue first, then yelled. In any case, he fell over backward, chair and dead body together. And in one fall, my mother's family plummeted 10,000 feet. Because everyone said Gong committed suicide. So sorry to see the Qing dynasty end. Now my mother's mother, my Habu, was a widow, not so rich anymore. She was in no big hurry to marry off her daughter. Her daughter could take care of her into her old age. That's what Confucius would have said. I don't know why everyone always thought Confucius was so good, so wise. He made everyone look down on someone else. Women were the lowest. In any case, my mother was already 21 years old, and she had been educated against Confucius thinking. Maybe she wanted to marry, maybe she did not, who knows. In any case, she would choose for herself. Uncle used to say that's what got her into trouble, thinking for herself. New aunt did not agree. The real trouble, new aunt said, was romance, a foolish desire on my mother's part to marry for love. She had met a student from Fudan University, a journalist. He was older, maybe 29, so he was very late in starting his education. My mother was already 26 years old at the time. This student was a man named Lu, a Marxist, just the kind of person Gong would have hated. New aunt said she knew all about him, because after my mother left, new aunt searched through her belongings and found a newspaper story about a student revolutionary named Lu. It must have been the same student she loved. New aunt said, why else would my mother have saved the article? The newspaper story, new aunt said, was very badly written, a tale of inspiration and heroes, so maybe only one part of it was facts, the rest just more and more water added to old rice. In any case, this is how the story went, like an old revolutionary tale, something like this, very romantic. Lu had been born in Shandong, that place up north of Shanghai where all the good seafood swim. He was a fisherman's son. So all he could look forward to in life was inheriting the holes in his father's nets, the ones he repaired every day. He had no education, no money, no way to change his life. And really, this was the kind of life everybody had, except for, of course, the scholars, the foreigners, and the most corrupt. But one day, a good Marxist came up to him and showed him a piece of paper. "Comrade, can you read this for me?" said the man with the paper. And Lu said, "Sorry, I was born a fool." Then the man said, "Comrade, what would you say if I told you I can teach you to read this and anything you want in 10 days? Come to a meeting and find out." This good man told Lu about a new method for teaching laborers and peasants how to free themselves from slavery. It was called 1,000 characters in 10 days. At this meeting, the Marxists said that if a person was hardworking enough, he could learn to read and write 100 characters a day, 1,000 characters in 10 days. He could be instantly educated, able to read common newspaper stories, write letters, conduct business, free himself from the bad life given to him. When they asked Lu to join, he answered, "The only plentiful thing I have is hard work and bad luck." So Lu worked hard and changed his luck, but he did not stop at 1,000 characters. He kept learning more and more. His diligence was that strong. He learned 2,000, 4,000, then 10,000. He learned enough until he was able to pass examinations and get into Fudan University. And because he was so grateful for being able to change his life, he vowed he would someday write about hardships of peasants and laborers, to be their mouth, to tell their story, to tell them they could change their fate by revolutionary ideas. So now you see why new aunt said my mother ruined her life for romance. How could my mother not fall in love with such a man? I think this Lu person also must have been handsome. Maybe he had the same features my mother admired in herself. Big eyes, light skin, a face that was neither too broad nor too thin, small lips, and very black hair. And he must have been, licking my eyes. Must be very modern thinking in other ways, because he asked my mother to marry him. No waiting to ask permission or use a go-between. That must have been a very exciting to my mother, a revolutionary marriage. She said yes immediately and then went home to tell her mother what she had done. Habu shouted at my mother, "How can you even think such a thing? How could you even talk to such a man? This is what happens when there are no emperors to rule the country." That's when my mother threatened to swallow gold if she was not allowed to marry Lu. In fact, that afternoon she melted down half a gold bracelet. She showed her mother how serious her threat really was. "Half a bracelet," new aunt used to say when she told this part. That's how fierce her will was. Of course, my mother did not swallow her bracelet, otherwise she would have died. She only pretended to swallow it. She painted a gold drop on her lip, then lay down on her bed, very still. Meanwhile, Habu kneeled in front of the family altar and prayed in front of her dead husband's shrine. She begged for forgiveness for guiding her daughter to such a bad conclusion. While praying like that, Habu thought she heard her dead husband say, "Go see my old friend Jiang Song-ying." So Habu went. She told Jiang about my mother, how bad she had become, how she threatened to kill herself over love for a revolutionary. She asked Gong-gong's longtime friend what she should do. That afternoon, Habu and Jiang Sao-ying made a contract. Jiang agreed to take the bad daughter of his old dead friend and make her his second wife. Whenever I remember this part of the story, I always think to myself, why didn't Habu protest? Why didn't she say to Jiang, "Second wife? Why not make her the first?" After all, the first was already dead. But maybe Habu was happy only to have her big problem solved. In any case, she agreed to everything. And that's how Jiang got a beautiful wife for his second wife. Not a slave girl or some girl from a low-class family, but an educated girl from a once respectable family. The next day, my mother saw the contract. She ran to Lu and asked him what she should do. Perhaps they kissed. Perhaps they squeezed tears from their eyes. I'm still thinking my mother was very romantic. And Lu said, "You must resist. That is the only way to put an end to the old marriage customs." And then he told her a story about a revolutionary who did exactly that. She was a young village girl, very beautiful, and she too had been told she had to marry an old man she did not even know. She said to her family, "I want to choose my own husband, or I refuse to marry." Her father was so angry he locked her up in a pig shed. Every day she shouted she would not marry the old man. She shouted until the day of her wedding. When she came out of the big pig shed, she was very quiet, also very dirty, as you can imagine. Her mother and aunts cleaned her up, dressed her up, then put her into a locked-up wedding sedan. Six hired men carried her the long distance from a village to the old man's house 1 village over. When they arrived, many people were already celebrating, playing loud music, ladling out good food. They laughed and shouted good wishes. They then opened the sedan door to welcome the bride. "Welcome, welcome." Ah, she was dead. She hanged herself with the rope of her own hair, tied to the sedan slats on top. So you see, Lu said to my mother, "You must resist too, not just for love, but for your country." My poor mother, all she could think about was that girl hanging by her own hair. She thought this was what Lu meant when he said, "You must resist." She went home, wondering if she was strong enough to fight fate, brave enough to die for love. In 2 days, she left to go to Jiang's house as his second wife. Yes, that's what I'm saying. She married that man, Jiang, my father, your grandfather, an old man before I was even born. Worse than that, when my mother arrived, she found there was already a third, fourth, even fifth wife. The servants told her the first had died of tuberculosis, and the second had killed herself when Jiang did not promote her to take the first wife's place. And now everyone said my mother had come to take over this bad luck position, a replacement for the dead second wife. So that's how my mother became the double second. And even though the other wives did not want my mother's bad luck spot, they still envied her, made her miserable for having a higher position. They often told her, "Huh, second wife, really? You are only the double second, half her strength." Sometimes I think my mother was finally chased away by those other wives. They made her life miserable, complaining if she ordered a special kind of noodle for herself, making fun of the foreign French shoes she liked so much, teasing her for reading newspapers, since they were not educated, and they envied her hair, her black hair, saying that was the reason my father had married her, for her hair. So maybe that's why she cut off her hair. She left it for those wives to fight over. But then I think my mother was strong enough to stand up to those other wives. Anyway, all wives in the family did that, complained all the time, fought over little things, and I knew those wives, Sanma, Sima, and Wuma. That's what I called them. Third mother, fourth mother, fifth mother. They were not so bad, not really. Sanma, for example, she had a typical Shanghai manner, teasing people if they acted too proud, criticizing everything equally so you didn't know what she really liked or didn't like. So maybe the real story is this. My mother ran away to go back to Lu. Of course she did. She loved him from the beginning. And that man in the movie theater the day before she disappeared, that was probably Lu. They were arranging how to meet, how she should run away. That's probably what she was doing. Perhaps she was becoming revolutionary in her thinking as well. That's why she took me into the city that day, to show me all the imperialist evils in Shanghai, to teach me what Lu had already taught her, what things were too messy, too sweet, too rare, too sad, and that's why she cut off her hair too, to show she was just like that girl who hung herself in her sedan chair, free at last. But then I think, if she did run away with Lu, then she would have been alive and she would have come for me. I was her sinker. She would have tried to visit me at my school, the same school she had gone to. She would have made a secret boat ride to the island. Hidden behind some bushes, she would have popped out to say, "I've come to take you back, meet my new husband." So then I think she must have run away because she was sad, too sad to stay in this world. Maybe she found out Lu had died. She was reading the newspaper, the one she bought at Fuzhou Road. Perhaps she had bought it earlier in the day that I remembered, and she read that he had been shot, killed while teaching more peasants to how to read. Many revolutionaries were killed that way, and her sudden grief reminded her of their long time ago love. While I slept in a dark theater, she thought about this, crying to think of her loss. While we were shopping for Wawa Yu, she was overcome with guilt, remembering how she did not resist eating this fish or resist her loveless marriage. As I slept in the pedicab on the way home, she felt shame that she had grown comfortable with her imperialist lifestyle, all the things Lu hated and fought against. And when she stared at herself in the mirror that night, she hated herself, decided to purify herself all at once. So she cut off her hair, a sure sign she could not turn back. She became a revolutionary in hiding, and her leaders ordered her not to see anyone from her past, and she obeyed without question. That's why she did not come back and get me. But then I think, my mother was not the kind of person to obey anyone. She followed her own mind, and maybe she followed her own mind until she became lost. Maybe that's what happened. She ran out the door crazy, not knowing where she was going, and sometimes I think my mother cut off her hair and became a nun. It was those nuns at her school. They prayed my mother would follow God's will, and that's what happened. After that, no will of her own. And sometimes I think it was the dead second wife, so jealous of my mother. Her ghost came back and took my mother away. And sometimes I think it is what everyone said. She suddenly took sick, then died that same hot night, and now she is buried on Chongming Island. Now I no longer know which story is the truth. What was the real reason why she left? They are all the same, all true, all false. So much pain in everyone. I try to tell myself, the past is gone, nothing to be done, just forget it. That's what I try to believe. But I cannot think this way. How can I forget the color of my mother's hair, Why should I stop hoping I will see it again? Of course, in my mind, I know she will never come back, but I will still remember. Many times in my life I remember, and it is always like this. In my heart, there is a little room, and in that room is a little girl, still 6 years old. She's always waiting, an achy hoping beyond reason. She is sure the door will fly open any minute now, and sure enough, it does, and her mother runs in, and the pain in the little girl's heart is instantly gone, forgotten, because now her mother is lifting her up, high up in the air, laughing and crying, crying and laughing. Sinker, sinker, there you are. Oh my God. What a story. Couldn't stop this, man. So now I'm reaching the chapter 6. I'll read another time today. Amazing. I just couldn't love reading out loud, being outdoor, feeling the breeze, holding my dog. Life is amazing. Thanks for watching and reading with me.